listening to Your Ultimate Life with Kellan Fluckiger, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hey, welcome to the show, LA Talk Radio, Your Ultimate Life. Today, I've got a weird background. So you notice this is a crazy picture, and of course, it's not even real. So here's the deal. Everybody has heard about artificial intelligence, and everything is, in the world about how it's going to change everything, and we're all going to go crazy, and it's going to take over the universe, and the AI bots are going to eat your lunch from time to time. Well, I don't know that that's going to happen, but what I do know is this picture behind me was made by AI. Artificial intelligence, and it was on that platform DALL-E, DALL-E with a number 2, DALL-E 2. And I use that a lot, and here's why. Because all I have to do is type in either a short or a long prompt, and I don't even remember what this one was. This was something about chessboards and cats or whatever, and the pictures, the pictures are gorgeous. They're fantastic. What this does for me is it sparks my imagination. And then when I look at this, I think of more descriptions and I type more and more and more in. I've got hundreds of these and I love using them for these backgrounds just for fun. Now, where this goes to money, business, and cash is not just the pictures, which I do. And you know what? You might think that doesn't make any difference, but it actually does, because people talk about my backgrounds all the time. They ask me where I got them, and then it launches into a conversation about creativity. It launches into a conversation about how to use the tools. And sometimes people freak out because AI is going to take over the world. But the other thing is that ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT, everybody's heard of that by now, or unless you've been living under a rock. ChatGPT is an LLM, large language model. And the large language model basically is a database of everything that everybody ever heard of, or knew, or saw, or learned ever in the universe. Now, I know that's an exaggeration, but it's the largest database ever assembled. And it's a lot of fun. And that's the interesting thing. It's actually a lot of fun. So if you're not using it, type in ChatGPT and look it up. Now, you might think it's, a party trick or something, but here's what's fun about it. I write copy. I write copy for my website. I write copy for sales letters. I write copy for emails. I write books and everything else. But what I love to do is I like to put something into ChatGPT and have it then give it back to me in different language, rewrite it for me. Not because I don't write well, because I do. But it gives it back with different words and different ideas and different nuances and expressions. And you know what I noticed one day? I was writing, so you see on the screen, ultimatelifechallenge.com. That is a challenge I'm running this week. So today was day 2, Tuesday. And tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday is going to be day 3, 4, 5. And it's about how to create clarity, confidence, and cash using your gifts, your talents, and how to turn that into a business and make a product. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But here's the interesting thing. I was working on some descriptions for this page. And if you want to see, go to, www.ultimatelifechallenge.com. Go there and check it out. So I wrote a description of what the challenge was about. I put it in ChatGPT. We went back and forth a few times, and I really enjoyed some of the mods that it made, and it came back a little better or a little different or using words I wouldn't have thought of. So it didn't replace anything. But it was a good sounding board, a good way to think about some different things. Now, there's this whole idea that all is going to replace all the writers and all the people in the world. It's not. It's just not. I'll tell you an example. 30 years ago, when was it? It would have been 1982. So, 40 years ago, I lived in Phoenix, Arizona. And at that time, synthesizers for music, those keyboards, they make all those weird sounds. They were just getting really popular. And the old Moog, Bob Moog, M-O-O-G, the old Moog, some people say Moog, the old Moog synthesizer had come out, and Rick Wakeman used it. If anyone that's listening that's old enough to know all that, then you're my age. But there was a fear. Oh, it was palpable. People talked about it. Synthesizers were going to put all the musicians out of business and all the orchestras and everything was going to disappear. Because why? Because the synthesizer was going to allow one person to replace all those musicians. So there was a lot of palpable fear that that was going to happen. And it didn't happen. And so here's the point I'm trying to make with that whole thing. Embracing change is a powerful stance instead of being afraid of change. Now, I'm joined today by Amber Shirley, who is my guest today. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kellan. I really appreciate it. It's good to be here.
You're welcome. And so here's a piece of embracing change. So we were having some technical challenges a little bit ago, and I just thought, well, we'll just start, and she'll just come right in the middle. Now, somebody could have a panic about that, or they could say, okay, so what? What a surprise. So here she is. Amber, welcome. I'm glad you're here with me today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you to you and your team for all of your help and your patience.
Yum. I'm excited that you're here with us. So here's what I'd like to do. Good. Well, today it's the ultimate life. Every day is a show about how to create a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy. And I started off on the theme of embracing change. I was talking about ChatGPT and the AI that made this funny picture behind me and everything else. And I want you to let's start about change. How has change and your ability to understand, embrace, roll with, deal with change played a factor in your growth and development?
I love this question because it continually plays a huge part. I'd say it's like one of the constants, change is a constant. I think something that has allowed me to continue to feel like the freedom to explore and try on new things is like I experience like a lot of flexibility, I'd say, even with like within my identity, right? Like I'm willing to transform and to change into even how I view myself so that I can create things that at one time seemed impossible. So I feel like a part of that is like just not just a willingness, but almost like a looking forward to opportunities where I can be very intentional. I think that's part of it too, like to not like short circuit, because sometimes like it can feel like, oh, change, it's unknown. It could be fearful, but I think I start looking at opportunities where I can embrace the process of change. I think that also helps too, like seeing it as a process and an opportunity to challenge things about myself that maybe I've always believed to be true or didn't think were possible for me. And I think being kind of fluid and flexible with that also gives me more space to allow other people to change and evolve, which they constantly are anyway.
So I love that. You made me think of a continuum. So things change. Change is the only constant in the universe, somebody said somewhere. So on one end, you can resist stuff. In the middle, you can sort of deal with it, or you can embrace change. And that's a continuum from resistance to embracing with everything in between. I want you to think out loud about your own journey getting to where you are, and I'm going to have you tell everybody where you are and who you are in a minute. But before I do that, I want you to talk about an example maybe where resistance to change showed up versus embracing, seeing the possibilities in change and the difference there for you. Can you do that?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm trying to think because I can think of like a few examples. All right. So I'm a coach. We'll talk more about that. And when I first transitioned into coaching, I was bringing a lot of what I knew to work and knew to be true from my previous work, working in corporate, right, into my work as a coach. So there was like I hadn't even yet been brought into a new possibility. Like I could do things in an entirely new and different way. And when I started working with my coach, Devin Bandison, who we both know, he brought in like this whole new possibility and way of being to create first myself, like internally, right? The internal experience would then create the internal experience would create the external expression, right? And I remember I had some resistance, like how could this work? Because I hadn't seen an example of it like for myself done in that way. And so I had what I was doing in my business, like I was bringing in like a lot of hustle energy. Like I was working 7 days a week. I had 23 clients, right, when I started working with my coach. And when he invited me into a new possibility of doing things, there was a little fearfulness. Like I wouldn't even say there was that much resistance, a little resistance, right? Because I couldn't see how that could be me. I could see how I had a desire for that to be me, and I'd seen other people do it, but I didn't really understand how I was going to logistically like apply essentially like a whole new identity when I had known so long being in the space. I've lived in New York for 18 years. I always had multiple jobs, right? So I was like so used to the hustle culture and the gig culture. And even though I knew there was like this idea of working smarter instead of working harder, I just didn't know how to do that. And so the idea of doing things entirely differently, and luckily my coach was like, it's going to be a little unsettling at first, right? Like you will experience the ground kind of like shaking underneath you. So he prepared me for that. But I would say it really became like an invitation for elevation, like into something. I had to give up a lot of who I knew myself to be in the way that I always did things. And there was a little bit of, but I've always done it this way. This is how I know how to do it. This is who I know myself as, the thing. And even though I'd had like lots of different careers, right? Like I was a backup dancer. I worked for the Yankees. Like I worked in finance, like lots of different paths that I'd followed. There was still like this identity around hustle and hard work to prove myself. Like I had this thing, like I wanted to show people how hard I was working. And when he invited me into just drop that as an identity, that was challenging.
I want to talk about this invitation to elevation. You said use that phrase, and I like it. Dropping identities, becoming a new thing. I mean, I'm thinking of a Marvel comic where someone, is a thing and then does a thing and then they're a new thing, right? A superhero takes the costume on or off, doesn't matter. New identity, secret identity. Deconstruct and demystify a little bit this idea of changing identities.
Yeah. Well, we'll always act in accordance with who we know and believe ourselves to be. So because I knew myself to be somebody who worked really hard, and I proved how hard I worked, and I could work multiple jobs, get very little sleep, run from one thing to another, I got a lot of praise for that as well, right? So that was a big part of my identity, like showing kind of my worthiness almost in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to say too, like, even though I made a commitment to making very like radical shifts, if we're going to deconstruct it, I was also very intentional about what I was committing to. So like setting my GPS to that thing, right? And I also knew that it was going to be a journey. And the most important thing was going to be making sure that I didn't like short circuit. Do you know what I mean? So like not taking on way too much at a time, but being able to know this is where I'm headed. And this is what I need to focus on in this current moment to get to the next step, just get me closer to that thing.
I want you to now tell us what you would have done in the beginning if someone had started there, which we didn't. Tell us a little bit about Amber, who she is, what she does, besides hustling in New York City and putting superhero costumes on and off.
I do love a superhero costume. My name is Amber Shirley. I am a coach, a life coach. I'm based here in New York City. Like I said, I've lived here for almost 20 years now. It was always my dream to move to New York. I grew up in the suburbs of DC in Northern Virginia. And my mom loves to tell the story about how when we went on a family reunion trip when I was like 6 or 7 years old, I told my mom, like I was looking at like the I think we were on top of the Empire State Building. And I was looking out over New York City, and I told her, when I grow up, I'm going to be a New Yorkian. So I'm a New Yorkian now. So I've been coaching. My coaching practice I've been running for about 5 years now. Like I said before that, I worked for the Yankees and I worked in corporate. I got to tour for a couple of years as a backup dancer and live abroad. And coaching is really like the culmination of so many things that I have always loved, and I finally gave myself permission to just go all in with. And I'd also worked with coaches. Like I've worked with coaches since 2010, so it's been in my world for a while.
So what is it that makes Amber's heart driven, lit up, excited about this coaching? Because, we all have skills. You developed skills as whatever you did for the Yankees and corporate and dancing and blah, blah, blah. And you sold those skills in the marketplace to make a living. That's fine. And then you migrated to this other thing. Like, what is it that calls you to this thing?
I've always considered myself to be an artist, a creative, a creator. And when I felt kind of the most like distant from or like adjacent to that thing, it was the times where I really wasn't utilizing my creativity and my creative energy. And what I learned through coaching is like, I tried, I minored in modern dance and fine art, like I paint and I sculpt and I write and I love to design things. And when I really slowed down to acknowledge what it is about that and creating that I love, it's the creative process. Like, to me, the most creative thing I could possibly do and help others to do is to consciously create a life, right? Like, I think that's the greatest masterpiece. We're given this life in this lifetime, and we have an opportunity to be very intentional about the way we design it, right? Like how we spend our time, what we do, who we're with, just so many things that I can think of that come to being like a conscious creator. So when I think about what lights me up, it's the opportunity to design my life on my own terms and to also help other people to set themselves free to do that on their terms. And I think it's so fun that everybody is so different, right? Like everybody's idea of a free life or a fun life or a creative life is so different. And being able to walk my clients through that and co-creating with them is just such a joy.
Why? I love that and agree with you because I'm in the same work. But why is it then, the way you describe it, like this excitement of creating a life like you want and everything else? Okay, why is it that nobody does that? In terms of percentage, like most people are asleep, awake. They're chafing at the job or jobs, plural, they have. They get a set of skills and sell them in the marketplace and do whatever they do. And they have that yearning and don't. So if that's so much fun and we love it and we ought to do it, and we're not, as in, the large numbers of people, what's up?
I mean, I don't know that it is necessarily for everyone in this lifetime, right? Like everybody has a different assignment, different callings. I met with a friend over the weekend, and for years she's worked in corporate, and she was always like, I could never be an entrepreneur. Like that just seems like there's no security, She's like, it just, to me, I need to know like what my salary is. I need to know my hours, like who I'm working with, right? Who I'm responsible for. And I get it. I said, I understand. And I've had that experience in the past. And she was just, anytime that she was with like me and other friends who are entrepreneurs, she's just like, I'm happy for you, but it's not for me. And then over the weekend, she said, actually, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit because I've been thinking that there might be something else, because she was saying that she realizes like she's living in the place where she moved out of the city. She's living in the place where she would like to retire. She's with the partner that she loves. She has a beautiful home and no time to enjoy it because she's still in the same kind of like she works so many hours, right? Has a high stakes, high pressure job. And so she was just ready. It was the time for her to be open to having a new conversation. So I think maybe some people, it's just not for them, right? I think there's space for everyone to do what calls to them. And then for some people, I think it takes some time, like I was, where I would look at other people doing that. And I'd think one day I could do something like that. One day that's going to be me. I'll just keep being around the people who are doing it,
Maybe I'll get infected.
Exactly. It works like that. And then there are the people who just kind of always know, and then they just go for it, kind of tunnel vision. But I don't know if for most people, it makes me think of Elizabeth Gilbert, like she talks about the hummingbird versus the jackhammer. And she always said that writing was the one thing she was here to do. It was her purpose and her path. And she would talk to people like, find your one thing and do it. And she said one day she'd given a talk and she never checks the messages that people write online. But after that, I think it was a book signing, and she went and she read and she said, and one of the comments was, I was so disappointed in Elizabeth Gilbert's speech because I was looking for her to have a new conversation. I hear everybody like, find your one thing, find your one path, and do that thing and only that thing. And she was saying, there's so many things that I'm passionate about and I want to do. And Elizabeth Gilbert really took that on and started thinking about the people in her life who she really admires and looks to. She said and she's more like a jackhammer, right? She would take like writing on like the worst of it every day to be able to be a full-time writer. And she said the people that she was most surrounded by in her world were more of the hummingbirds. They have lots of different interests and callings, lots of things that they find charming and different things that they focus on, right? It's like she used an example of a friend who like was a model and then she was in real estate and then she opened, I think like a laundromat or something or a dry cleaning place, right? So it's like I think in that mind frame too, like to know yourself to be the person who you can rely on as the greatest return on investment, right? Like wherever you go and whatever you do, I think that is just like a fundamental shift in the mind of somebody like a creative or an entrepreneur who's like, I just trust myself to do this thing, to go all in and to figure it out. Because I can trust myself. Like that's how I look at it. I feel like there's more job security in what I do because I don't have to worry about an employer or layoffs or a salary cap.
There's two things that makes me think of. One is my angel wife, Joy. She's a hummingbird. She has at least 27.9 things that she could do, is doing, and she was just, we were having a group coaching call. I run this group, and she attends sometimes as well, just because she's got projects, and sometimes she just does. But she was talking about one of her things that she wants to do that's still on the side burner somewhere, and that's launch a skincare line. And she's been entrepreneur and all of her life, a high-powered online seller and a this and a that. And her dad was an archaeologist. The number of things in your description of a hummingbird is fabulous. The other thing it made me think of is that movie Soul, Soul, like soul. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
Go look at it.
Okay.
It's funny. It's about, guess what? A jazz musician. And he swears all the way through, I was made to play the piano and everything. And there's this whole complicated, and it's very whimsical and very funny about dying and, going to the great beyond and not and everything else. But then he gets another chance to come back and realizes that jackhammer, one thing, there maybe just kind of enjoy everything that is at this moment, be in the moment and live what is. And so it's about a jackhammer butterfly transition. So the movie's Soul, and you'll love it. Soul, and it has all kinds of little, one-line characters in it and weird animations, and it's hysterical. And it's just what you just said. So that's fun. That's fun for
love
you.
That your wife is interested in skincare. It's one of my passions. I love it.
Is it?
Ah! It's like a side. It's something that I don't ever think that I would do as a career, but I just like anyone who knows me knows of like my deep love, passion, obsession for skincare. So.
Oh, well, she's not dabbling. I mean, she's already talked to some labs and gotten formulations, and like when I say in it, she's like in it, right? It's all kinds. We went to Australia and she had a conversation with somebody who was growing their own herbs and was going to have them ship some stuff, and it didn't turn out, whatever. But all right, that's fun. So I want to come back to another thing that you said. I love the hummingbird and the jackhammer thing, and I think I've heard that before, but I don't think I've heard it the way I heard it this time. What do you see happening we're in the midst of all kinds of turmoil. The world's in turmoil. We got a war going on. We got people that are uncertain about the economy, and, we're just sort of stumbling our way out of the COVID mess and all of the rest, and the jobs are changing and everything else. Talk about the calling of a coach in terms of helping people migrate from one thing to another or intentionally create themselves. Like, talk about that process. What do you do to help people create, again, this in the context of that fulfilling life, the ultimate life?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's important too, like when I said there's like space for everyone to do their thing. So I think it's important too, to first give yourself some space to figure out what is that's calling to you now, right? Like when the question was brought to me, which I'm sure we hear a lot, like if you were to do the thing that you're already doing that aren't getting paid for, that you really love, right? So when I made the announcement to people, I didn't make like a big like social media announcement or something, but I just like started telling people, oh, I'm a coach now. And people are like, weren't you already a coach? Like nobody was surprised by it, because it was one of the things I just loved the most. I love hearing about what somebody is feeling called to create, to breathe life into, to bring to the world, and then moving them from a process where it's no longer just a dream and a concept, but having like strategies and some frameworks in place to actually bring it to life, to create the thing. And one of the most important, like foundational, and it's always happening like underneath and behind the scenes nonstop, is the being part, the identity, to know yourself and trust yourself as the person who can do that thing. And the best way to do it is make a commitment to something that you're just going to see it all the way through, right? Because sometimes people, oh, is that it? Maybe it's not it. Maybe I should change it. It didn't work out that great. It's like, commit to one thing. Choose the thing, then commit to it. And then we can create from that commitment. Because once like you commit to it, it just automatically eliminates so many things that aren't it, right? And so like the identity piece of it is like when you know yourself as that person who can commit in such a way where you can have those blinders on and very clearly see, this is taking me in the direction of, this would take me away from the thing.
I love that. The commitment. One of the things I tell people is especially when I'm on podcasts of other people, I'll say, I'm going to give you $1 billion secret. And of course, then the host leans in and they get all excited. I'll say, it's really simple. I said it, I did it. I said it, I did it. I said it, I did it. And I call that the success cadence, because we learn so much to not trust ourselves. And when we become the person for whom that is life breath, I said it, I did it, you can have anything you want. I said it, I did it. I said it, I did it. And I call that I have 2 or 3 of them, and this isn't my show, it's yours, but that's $1 billion secret. I said it, I did it. I said it, I did it. And when people set these big, hairy goals and don't do it, what I tell them is shrink the damn goal. Make it, instead of setting goals and failing, teaching yourself you're a liar and you can't be trusted, shrink the goals so that I said it, I did it, I said it, I did it is the truth of your being. Ooh. You can grow the goals later. Anyway.
I love that so much. And that's like where the trust comes from. Like those little things every day. I said it, I did it, right? Like imagine what could happen if there were like, just set up one thing every day that I said it, I did it, Like even like I look at little wins. Oh, I do this thing with one of my best friends, Erin, and every day we send each other our high lows. So it's our highs of the day, our lows of the day. And it's usually like maybe like half a dozen things. And it's so nice to be able to acknowledge and celebrate like the small things. Like I still live in an apartment where I have to go downstairs to do my laundry. So I often avoid it. You know what I mean? And then it like piles up. But the days that I say I'm going to do my laundry and I did it, I said it, I did it, those feel like such a big win because it's the last thing that I want to do. But if I've done my laundry on a day that I said I was going to do it and I did it, I'm so proud of myself and I make sure I put that in my high lows.
I said it, I did it. It's funny, that simple. I mean, it's 5 words or 6 words, and it's the key to the universe. And if you become that, you can have anything you want. Having is not the problem. It's the being, as you've talked about earlier. So you talked about loving writing and all that other good stuff. Have you written, tell us what you've written. Have you written a book or 2 or 10? Or where are we on that journey?
I could at this point. I write all the time. And it's interesting because I write so much. It's a part of my day. And I really haven't been sharing it. And that's all about to change. The places that I have shared it, I have an apprenticeship for coaches in training who are building their business. So it's like 3 parts. It's all of their internal stuff. And then it's building really strong foundational skills as a coach. And then the part of building their business, having a thriving practice. And so I write a lot for that. I write for The Created Life, which is my community, and I create different workbooks. One of my favorite things to do is to make workbooks, like the writing and the graphics part of it. Eventually,
you do your own graphics? Are you a graphic?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you said you painted, so yeah. Well, then do you use any of the artificial AI stuff, like these pictures? Isn't that fun?
It's so good.
All right, keep going.
Yeah, so it's like one of the things that I'm doing now, like I'm in this funnel building certification course, because when I started learning about like what funnels are and like the copy and the graphics and the design, like as just, some of the parts, but I'm like, well, that's what I'm doing on the weekends. Like, on the weekends when I'm just like kicking back, I'm designing things on Canva, I'm writing, I'm reading. And yeah, so I'll be sharing a lot more of that soon.
Good. So when is your first book coming?
That's a really good question, Kellan. Like I said, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, and I think I would just have to choose a date that I'd have it.
I think just a few minutes ago you told me pick and see it through.
Choose and commit to it. Yeah. Shall I do it here?
If you want to, that's up to you. I mean, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a woman who has made those discoveries, who felt called to do something, who has taken the learning part seriously since 2010. She's got 12, 13 years, doing that. She's helping other people do this. And what I find, it's cool to have a book. You say, okay, I got a book, yay. But what it's way better than that is it's the tool to help you organize systems and frameworks and things. And one of the mistakes I see people make is they try to put everything in one. Why don't you, as a step 1, organize a series of 3, a trilogy or 5 books that you might do sequenced over a period of time and say, I'm going to do this. And here's the first one. Why? Because I said so. And then organize them in a process that feels good to you, that then you can see, well, I'll have this one done in 6 months and then a year, that one, or whatever the time frame is you decide to do. Because you're full of creativity, you're full of writing, you're full of discipline. You've got the tools in terms of discipline and New York hustle. Not that you need to do that, but you know what I mean? I think that we'd all be well served if you did that.
Oh, thank you. I agree. And I love what you said about 2 things, the framework and also allowing it to evolve. It doesn't all have to be in one. One of my clients is actually writing a book now, and it's in the editor's hands, right? So she's like, I'm thinking of all these other things. I should have said this. I should have included this now, right? And I'm like, you're going to write more than one book, So put it all down and save it for the next one.
I love it. So I want you now to brag a little. If people want to find out about your coaching certification or apprenticeship or whatever it is that you have, since I've mutilated it, fix me.
That's
Tell me
great.
what it is. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me how to find you. Tell people how to follow you for whatever social you do or don't do. It doesn't matter, but share with us.
Thank you. Yeah. So you can find me on my website, ambershirley.com. My website is in the process of being updated and will be completed at the end of September. And my Instagram is Amber_Soul Sisters. Again, I do one-on-one coaching. I have a coaching apprenticeship program. I do retreats called the Created Life Experience, where I bring together high-level creatives. And then over the course of 4 to 5 days, everybody comes in with a project that they're working on, and it becomes a creative incubator. So we do group sessions, and then everybody's broken up into smaller groups. And then on the final day, everybody presents their creation, and really cool, really amazing things have come out of that. Not just the projects, but also the collaborations and the co-creations, the strategic partnerships. So
Fabulous. So I'm going to go in a different direction now. I want you to think about clients, and obviously without any details or names or whatever, but I want you to think about a client or two where they came in one set of circumstances with one set of beliefs, one set of, I call it a context straitjacket, but one set of things that limited them, and you were able to work with them and see some metamorphosis that allowed them to have lights again and to do a thing that gives you the fuel to say, I got to do more of this. Just tell me about a story about someone that you've worked with.
I can think of so many. When I think of one of my clients who she's at top of my mind, like right now, when she's a very talented creator, a writer, actor, producer. And when she came to me and we started working together, she was very much identified with, like, in the hustle energy. Like, we called it the extraordinary underdog, right? Like, there was something, she really gained a lot of value in continuing to see herself as the underdog who does extraordinary things, right? Like, I'm the actor who does indie films. I'm the person who creates like small budget short films through crowdsourcing, right? And there was something that she was very attached to as an artist, where she believed that gave her like almost like validity or a certain level of identity, right? And then when we started looking at what is a new possibility, right? Like, extraordinary underdog had served her so well up until this point, because she knew that it was time. Like, it had gotten to the point where it was uncomfortable staying small, staying in that role. And we started looking at what is a possible new identity, a new level of being. And she started allowing herself to dream of and see herself as the star. Like, not the guest star or the co-star, right? The friend, to actually start seeing herself as that. And one of the things we did was we burned the boats of the co-star so that she was only doing guest star roles. And when she first told her team that, her agent and her manager, they were like, why would we do that? That doesn't make sense. Like, this is working, right? And she's like, I just have to trust that this is the thing. And so then she started being offered co-stars. And she said when she first started turning them down, everything in her was like, what are you doing? Like, that's a paycheck. That's rent, like, that's food for the month. And she just had to hold on to what we were saying was now the new identity was star consciousness, right? So moving from extraordinary underdog into embracing the idea and just trying it on of being a star, allowing herself to be seen and known in that way, and to even talk about herself in that way. So the first time that she was offered, and it was really challenging because it was a co-star on a show she really wanted to be on. And then she was like, but I'm only doing guest stars. So she had her manager negotiate that role into a guest star because they liked her so much. And now she's done 2 leads now in 2 films, 2 independent films, getting so close to even bigger things because she finally allowed herself the opportunity to step into a very different identity. And with that identity shift, not only did she not miss out on the things that she was so worried about, she finally had space to invite in the kind of jobs that she wasn't really seeing herself as being in the running for.
When you described that, you used the word allowing 2 or 3 times. And each time you said it, you chewed on that word in a very interesting way, allowing, and massaged it. And I love that. And I want you to tell me, what does it mean to allow some new thing in the way that you have just used that?
First of all, Kellan, I love how you pick up on things, and thank you for that. And I do, like, there's certain words that when they come out of my mouth, they just taste good. And I think allowing must be one of those, clearly. So when I think about allowing, it makes me think of like the question, who would you be uninterrupted? So when I think of who would I be uninterrupted, there's so much allowing rather than pushing up against, right? Like the pushing up against says like, wants to give all of the reasons and explanations for why it's not possible. Like, what do you know about my past, right? What do you know about like my childhood or what happened to me, right? There are all those things. And I'm not saying they're not valid and they're not important and they've shaped who we are. Yes. And then there's also something in allowing something new to come in and essentially like take over, right? So if like all the space has been, for example, if somebody's like in a relationship where it just has not been the type of relationship that is like loving, supportive, in alignment with who they truly know they desire like in their heart to be with, right? There has to be like a removal of that's not working to have space to allow in the relationship, the experience that is the thing, right? So it's like the allowing is almost, it's a shedding of things that are no longer working, right? Because sometimes it's like harder to do the thing that we have outgrown, but it can seem easier just because it's so familiar. And then it takes a willingness to like put it down. I think of it as like, there have been times in my life where I put on a lot of armor, right? To protect myself. And then it really worked at the time. And I'm so grateful that it did. And then it served its purpose. So what that armor then becomes that had like lovingly been protecting me then becomes a prison, right? Because I've outgrown it and I no longer need the thing. So instead of like strong arming it to like get it off, it's just like allowing it to drop.
I love that. There's a long story that I can't tell because we don't have time about a long conversation I had with different characters on the stage of my mind. And one of them I named the Protector. And it talked about these different roles that it played. And instead of fighting with it, like you said, I simply renegotiated the contract. And we had I like it was part of the business, right? Well, let's renegotiate your assignment. And so we did. And I actually wrote a contract and signed it with both names and the whole thing, renegotiated the contract of the thing. And sometime when there's time, I'll tell you about that. There's not time today, but it was quite an experience.
Wow.
Long, several hours of wandering and meditating and identifying characters on the stage and who was talking and what their roles were and all this other stuff. Well, I'm just going to turn you loose now. Tell me anything that I need to know to live my ultimate life. You said there's space for everybody. There's a time for things. And even your friend came and said, I could never do that. Tell me more about that. That kind of thing, right? And this, I love the thing of allowing. I have a client who we decided that was his word, the state of allowing. And so that was a thing that we have now used for 2 or 3 years to elevate up and up and up, and he's done all kinds of incredible stuff. So I love that you use that. I'm going to turn you loose for a minute. Tell me anything that I didn't ask you that you know, that you've experienced, that you've learned, that you've shared, that you're exploring, and that you might be thinking about allowing.
Ooh, I like that question. Anything you didn't ask me? There was just something you had talked about, the new contract, right? Like negotiating a new contract. And it just made me think of, I am trained in parts work, which is IFS, internal family systems. And the idea is like we have all of these different parts, and all parts are inherently good. They're all doing their job to the best of their knowing, based on that's the one job that they do, right? So they're doing it, even like, let's say the part that's like the imposter, right? Its entire job is to focus on that thing, right? So it winds up like over functioning, but its entire role is, from what it knows to do and be, is to just love you and keep you safe, right? So it's like saying all the things from that vantage point and that perspective. It's like, think about this, right? This could make you look like an imposter. This is what the imposter would need to say and remind you of. Like, it's just doing its job. So I think in just like more having, just building on that conversation is just, we will always have so many different parts in our internal system, just simply doing what they do with the knowledge that they have, right? Which is very limited to their role. And I've found in just having those conversations, like being able to say, like, all right, anxiety, what's up? Like, what do you need to tell me? What do you want to share? I'll give you a couple minutes. And then I need to get back to what I'm committed to creating, right? So I've learned to not be at odds with or make those parts wrong or make them the enemy of what I'm creating, but to give them space. It's like they're not the honorary guest at the party, but they can like stop by, for like a drink, and then they gotta go.
I love it. So we've got to wind down here, but I had the three main characters were the creative, the obsessive, and the protector. And so we had this hours long conversation, and we don't have time to do that now, but I get it when you talk about IFS. We've got another client that does a lot of that. Amber, I just am delighted. Thank you for being here with me today, for sharing your heart, your love, and all of the stuff that you are, and teaching us about allowing and creating space for new things and entertaining these possibilities. Thank you for who you're being and for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And when we had a conversation last month, or maybe the month before, and I told you I was so looking forward to this conversation, because just the way you listen and how you hear, what you pick up on, like I can feel you like chewing on it and ingesting it, and then like allowing it to live through you, like in your life experience and your filter, and then like coming back out in such a beautiful way. Like I told you, I was like, these are some of the best questions I've ever been asked, like just on our short call before. And so I've really been looking forward to this. So thank you for who you be and what you do and what you're sharing, this gift that you're sharing with so many of us. I feel really honored to have been a small part of it today. So thanks.
Thank you. Listeners, watchers, I want you to just chew on this a couple of times. Go back, go through, listen. What are you allowing and not allowing in your world? What are you making space for? What are you doing out of a habit that you could end and make room for a new thing and identify with new possibilities? I can tell you, because I've done it, if you do that, you'll be moving forward with fun and with joy to create your ultimate life.
You're listening to Your Ultimate Life with Kellan Fluckiger, only on LA Talk Radio.